For most people, home is the last place they expect horror to live. But on a cold January evening in Massachusetts, one quiet family house became the scene of something almost impossible to understand. A husband left for takeout and medicine, expecting to be gone only a short while. When he returned, the silence inside felt wrong. Within minutes, a picture-perfect family was shattered forever, and a case that still haunts people today began to unfold. From the outside, Lindsay Clancy seemed like the kind of person people naturally trusted. She had built a career around helping others, working as a labor and delivery nurse, guiding anxious parents through some of the biggest moments of their lives. Friends and colleagues described her as kind, careful, compassionate, and deeply committed to the people in her care. She married Patrick Clancy, a software engineer, and together they built what appeared to be a beautiful life in Duxbury, Massachusetts. Their home looked like the kind of place many families dream about. There was a backyard with a white fence, a play area for the kids, and the warm, polished image of stability. Their daughter Cora was bright, loving, and full of big dreams. Their son Dawson was outgoing, cheerful, and the kind of child who could light up a room with a smile. Their youngest, baby Callan, was known by loved ones as a happy, easygoing baby. Photos of the children covered the walls. On social media, the family looked close, grateful, and deeply connected. To friends and relatives, Lindsay and Patrick seemed devoted to each other and utterly devoted to their children. But behind that image, Lindsay had been struggling. After becoming a mother, the emotional weight of parenting began to hit her in ways that were difficult to manage. She sought therapy, saw psychiatrists, and was prescribed multiple medications as her anxiety worsened. As time passed, she became increasingly fearful about balancing motherhood and work. In September, her anxiety had become especially severe. She went for further evaluation, searching for answers and relief, but the full depth of what she was experiencing did not seem to be understood. Then, on January 1st, she told Patrick she was having thoughts of harming herself and the children. Alarmed and frightened, she admitted herself to McLean Hospital for psychiatric treatment, where she stayed for several days. When she was discharged, doctors concluded she was not a danger to herself or others. For a brief time, things seemed to improve. The family went out together. Her messages sounded more upbeat. She said the thoughts had gone away. To the people around her, it looked as though she might be recovering. But what no one could fully see was the battle still unfolding beneath the surface. January 24th, 2023 began like an ordinary winter day. Lindsay took the children to appointments, spent time with them at home, and later played with them outside in the snow. She even took photos of the children and sent them to Patrick and to her mother. In those images, the family looked normal, happy, and safe. Patrick was working from home that day in the basement. Nothing about the afternoon suggested that it was moving toward catastrophe. Later in the day, Lindsay searched online for children's medication and checked directions to a restaurant called The Ven. She then called a CVS to ask whether they had the medicine in stock. Soon after, she texted Patrick and asked whether he wanted to order takeout because she had not cooked and said it had been a long day. It was an ordinary kind of message, the sort married couples send without thinking twice. Patrick agreed. He chose his meal. She chose hers. She called in the order and told the restaurant Patrick would pick it up. At around 6:09 p.m., Patrick left the house. Before he returned, Lindsay reminded him by text to also pick up the children's medication at CVS. Security footage later showed him arriving at the store. At one point, Lindsay called him, and the two stayed on the phone for several minutes. Patrick later said the conversation seemed normal, though he had the sense she might have been doing something else while they spoke. Nothing in that call prepared him for what he was about to walk into. When Patrick came home around 6:15 p.m., the first thing that struck him was the silence. It was too quiet. Their house was normally filled with movement, voices, toys, and the everyday noise of family life. But now it felt still, empty, almost frozen. He began looking for Lindsay and the children, but no one answered. As his concern deepened, he went upstairs toward the bedroom and found the door locked. That alone felt wrong. Lindsay had never locked herself in there before. He tried the handle. Nothing. He knocked, called out, and got no response. Panic rising, he forced the door open. Inside, he saw blood on the floor, blood on the windowsill, and a bloody knife on the bedside table. In one instant, he understood that something terrible had happened. He looked out the window and saw Lindsay lying in the backyard below. Patrick rushed outside and called 911.
Sorry, dispatch. Got out of the call. Respond with the police. 4747 Star Street. The party jumped off the top floor of the house.
It's unknown where the knife is, or wherever she used to slit her. She's in the... Looks like they're pinging around the back.
I'm going to get all 3 mutual aids at this time. I'm getting you 3 mutual aid ambulances. I struck the box. We got 3 on the way.
Lindsay was still alive, badly injured, with wounds to her neck and wrists after an apparent suicide attempt and fall from the window. In shock, Patrick asked her what she had done. She answered that she had tried to kill herself and jumped. Then he asked the question that mattered more than anything else. Where were the children? Lindsay gave an answer that would change his life forever. She told him they were in the basement. Patrick stayed with her until first responders arrived, then ran back into the house, still on the phone with the dispatcher. He headed for the basement stairs, calling out to the children over and over, desperate for any sign that they were alive. There was only silence. When he reached the bottom, he found all 3 children unconscious on the floor, each with an exercise band around the neck. The dispatcher heard his scream through the phone. It was the sound of a father realizing, in a single unbearable moment, that his world had been destroyed. Cora and Dawson were pronounced dead at the scene. Baby Callan was rushed for emergency treatment and fought for life for several days before he too died from his injuries. In less than half an hour, the Clancy family had been torn apart beyond repair. Patrick, who had left the house on an ordinary errand, returned to a nightmare no one could have imagined. Lindsay was transported for medical treatment and later charged with 3 counts of murder, along with additional charges related to strangulation and assault. In the days that followed, the story spread everywhere, not only because of its brutality, but because it raised painful, difficult questions with no easy answers. How could a mother described as loving and attentive do something so unthinkable? Was this the result of severe mental illness, medication, deliberate planning, or some combination too complex for simple explanations? Her defense argued that postpartum psychosis and overmedication played a major role. Prosecutors pushed back, describing the killings as deliberate and calculated. Investigators later uncovered disturbing details, including diary entries that showed resentment toward 2 of the children, as well as phone searches that intensified suspicions of premeditation. Toxicology results, meanwhile, showed prescribed medications within therapeutic levels, something prosecutors used to argue that she had been thinking clearly. As the legal case moved forward, public opinion split sharply. Some saw the tragedy through the lens of maternal mental health and believed a catastrophic psychiatric collapse had taken place. Others focused on the planning, the timing, and the evidence suggesting intention. In court, a not guilty plea was entered. The debate only grew louder, but for Patrick, none of it could restore what he had lost. In the aftermath, he spoke with extraordinary heartbreak and grace, saying that he still loved Lindsay and forgave her, even while grieving the unimaginable loss of Cora, Dawson, and Callan. It was the kind of statement that stunned people almost as much as the crime itself. Later, he ran the Boston Marathon in memory of his children, raising money to honor them. What makes the case even more haunting is how carefully ordinary the final hours appeared. There was no dramatic confrontation, no obvious scene of chaos, no warning visible from the outside. There were errands, texts, dinner plans, medicine, winter playtime, and a husband downstairs finishing work. That normalcy is what makes the timeline so hard to process. It did not look like the lead-up to violence. It looked like family life moving through another weekday. The case also reignited public discussion around postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, and the way intrusive thoughts can be misunderstood or minimized. Severe postpartum psychosis is rare, but when it happens, it can involve delusions, paranoia, hallucinations, and a break from reality. The defense pointed to that possibility. Prosecutors argued the evidence showed awareness and choice instead. Between those two positions sits a tragedy that continues to disturb anyone who studies it, because whatever explanation the court ultimately accepts, 3 children are still gone. And that is the part that lingers longest. Not the headlines, not the arguments, not even the courtroom battle. It is the image of a father walking into a suddenly silent home, sensing that something was deeply wrong before he even knew why. It is the unbearable speed of it all. And it is the memory of 3 young lives lost in the one place they should have been safest. That contrast between warmth and horror is why this case grips people long after the first shock fades.